Now that we have covered the typical structures of journals papers, theses and dissertations, we have discussed quite in detail regarding the components of each sections and how each section is constructed. There are also quite a number of examples being disclosed on how those sections can be effectively presented. These include the title, the abstract, introductions, literature review, methodology, result, analysis, discussions, as well as the conclusions. In fact, with adequate exposures to the research methodology, you will be able to grab the significant part of each sections in your thesis or dissertations. You know what is the important components that constitute the sections, what are the purposes for those sections, what kind of information that needs to be presented within those sections. There are so many references and modules that you can go through for you to acquire the necessary informations regarding those sections. This is achievable, especially you are willing to learn and willing to spend time to really look into some tips and guidance for you to construct a good sections for your thesis. And with that, you should be able to acquire a good thesis, at least in the technical aspects, as well as in the thoroughness of the coverage. There is another challenging part, which is equally significant to the technical writing. It is related how do you put all those informations together in proper language, using proper writing style, as well as the proper format. To me, this is more challenging, especially for me as a non-native English speaker. My mother tongue is not English, but all the technical papers as well as the thesis needs to be written in English. If you are also like me, a non-native English speaker, you will come to a situation that always receiving the comment by your supervisor or the examiner or the reviewers of the journals papers, reminding you that your English is poor, you will need to improve your English, or you are asked to proofread your technical writings, which if you seek help from the professional proofreader, it's going to cost you some money. This is rather expensive for you, especially you are a postgraduate student. What we are about to discuss, starting from this video, it will be related to the writing parts, which include the tenses that you're going to use in your thesis, as well as the other grammatical rules, which we normally have misstated while writing our thesis and technical papers. When I was a student, I used to ignore the significance of this part. I pay more emphasis in knowing the structures of the thesis. I was so concerning about what to be incorporated within each section of my thesis. Although I know that my English level is not that high, I tried my best to construct good sentences, use some grammar checking tools to help me identify the grammatical errors, and then proceed with the submissions. Then what's going to happen next? There will be several rounds of rejections by my supervisor, where a significant portion of it is due to poor English writing. And then I realized that what I have learned from my secondary school or high school in terms of the grammar in the English is actually not sufficient for me to produce the technical writing. I learned grammar, simple grammatical rules, but I was not aware that readability is another important factor of technical writing. I was not aware of the concept of readability, and then I used to think that Writing complex sentence using bombastic words, it means that I'm good in English. These are the areas often being rejected by my supervisor. Until I realized that I will just need to make simple sentences, using simple words, making the message to be effectively delivered. That is my ultimate goals of writing. Then I learned from the mistake. Due to numerous cycles of submissions and rejections, I come to realize that sometimes both myself and my supervisor are frustrated because the similar sentences or similar points has been revised on and off for several times. I wrote a statement being commented by the supervisor. My supervisor proposed another statement. I used those statements, put them into my text, and then resubmit again. The next time my supervisor review my papers or my thesis, again there will be comment, and then the statement needs to be reconstructed, which I feel myself, why is it so? I thought the statement was given by the supervisor. Why he went on and off revising his own statements? This was something that I was not aware of, which after several years, I realized that the main reason is when your supervisor put into his statement into your text, the writing style become inconsistent. It will be very awkward for you to read through, which is obviously the statement came out from two different persons. That is not the critical issue. The more critical issue is on the readerships. The informations are not properly arranged, where the understanding of the reader is not progressively being constructed. There are so many informations flying here and there. This leads to the text seems to be quite messy, difficult to comprehend, and then there will be numerous revisions in terms of the writing styles as well as the text. There is one more reason for that. Is normally when we want to review somebody's work, normally we focus on one thing. It is quite rare for us to be able to cater for so many aspects, one goal at the same instance. What my supervisor did was reading through my text. Obviously the readability is a problem. And then he see my statements was so poorly constructed, improper usage of the terminology, so many grammatical errors. Then he start revising the grammar, which at the same time he might not be able to fully consider the readability part of the sentences, especially in terms of the connections between the paragraph as well as the linkage between the sentences. The only way to prevent these on and off revisions of the same statements, it is for the supervisor to reconstruct the entire section or the entire chapter. You know that this one is not going to happen. The postgraduate study is your work, it's not your supervisor work. Therefore, on and off, you will struggle with your supervisor until both of you are quite fed up. Why is it we are unable to make the thesis looks better? And every time when we look into the thesis, there will always be some annoying part, either the grammatical error, either improper usage of the terminology, either the message is not clearly delivered, either there is no linkage between the sentences, either there are errors in terms of the tenses, either the entire sections is not readable. There are so many reasons that can lead to the dissatisfactions. Having this story tell you, the purpose is to draw your attentions to be serious about this section, which I used to not really paying any attention on this, as my motive is to quickly finish my thesis, knowing the components in each sections, make sure all the informations are there, but I forgot that it is only when I am able to effectively deliver the informations, the thesis is considered valid. Otherwise, it will be quite annoying for the readers to read through with so many errors, which distract them interfere their paces of reading, sometimes might mislead them, leading to misunderstanding of certain concepts, or totally cannot get your meaning. This will eventually dishearten the reader, making the readers to disengage with your thesis, and it will be based on the mercy or grace, as well as the determinations of the reader, or when it is obligated to, for him to finish your thesis. Normally, if the readers is not obligated to, such as when they are the supervisor or the examiner, a typical reader may not want to finish your thesis. Okay, that's it for the stories. Now let us look into the basic principles of language skills, writing style, and editing. These are several things that you might want to know regarding this. First, you need to avoid overuse of the complex words or jargon. In fact, there are so many words of choice that you can use in your thesis. You don't have to always go for the complex words. Your ultimate concern is not looking for bombastic words to be shown in your thesis in the manner that the reader might or might not aware of the meanings of the words, that the reader needs to on and off go and check the relevant meaning. Normally we don't want to do that, because this gives a reason for the readers to disengage with your thesis. Therefore, by all means, try to use the most precise word as simple as possible. And then the second thing is the conciseness. You will try to write your thesis in the fewest words possible. Same goes to your journals paper, which the degree of conciseness is also at a very high level. The students might have a perception that a typical thesis have the number of pages which is more than journals paper. That means they have plenty of tolerance for them to write long sentences, but this is not true, because the coverage of the thesis, it will be more detailed and broader. It nearly have to cover every single minor aspect in your research study. As compared to the journal paper, the emphasis it will be the significant part of your research study. Therefore, the amount of information to be delivered in your thesis, technically it will be more than journals paper. Therefore, the numbers of pages it will be more. Another one, about your format of your thesis. Normally the text is bigger and there will be line spacings between your texts. The font size might be bigger than typical journals. For thesis, normally font size 12 will be used, and for some journals paper, the font size can be as small as 10. And for your thesis, there will be a lot of spacings between the lines. Bare minimum, it will be 1.5 spacing. In some institutions, there will be 2 times spacings. Although the number of pages is more, but the spacing, it will be more as well. So technically, if you are talking about 200 to 300 pages, the amount of word that you may have is also limited, because those also include the tables as well as the figures to be presented in your thesis. Therefore, your writing should also focus on the conciseness. If you can finish the statement, delivering the necessary informations within a few words, you should not use longer sentences to present the same informations. You should always choose the correct sentences with the fewer words possible, and put everything straight to the point. Avoid the redundancy as well as the repetitions in terms of the informations. You have to take care of your punctuations and the grammars. This is the critical area for us as a non-native English speakers, as English may not be in our daily life. Even though you have some part of your daily life, for example in your works, or for example when you are in the campus doing your postgraduate study, communicating with your colleagues as well as the staff in the institutions, You may use English, but normally we are using broken English to communicate each other. But when we come to the technical writing, we should use standard English, proper English, and perfect English. This will be rather challenging for us. Therefore, we should learn how to construct good sentences, trying to avoid the common mistakes which will be presented at the later stage of the slides. If possible, you can ask your peers to do some proofreading, or you can have software to help you to identify some simple errors in your writings. Of course, you can find the professional proofreaders to help you to proofread those. This is going to cost you some money, and it is not cheap, as they are providing the professional services to you. Next is about your writing style. You need to be consistent, objective, and impersonal, especially for your supervisor and the examiner, those who are very experienced in reading the students' work. It is very easy for them to detect from the writing style whether the entire thesis is actually coming from one person or whether there will be plagiarism involved by observing your writing styles. Even two good English writers may have different ways of writing, different approach of expressing different aspects in the research. And then throughout the thesis, the way the information is being addressed, it will be inevitably repeated. It is easy for us to identify whether this part is coming out from you or you are actually copying from somebody else. You should minimize the repetitions of the words, especially in the successive sentences, and you should minimize the redundancy in terms of the informations which has been continuously mentioned throughout your thesis. This will dilute the concentrations of informations or the concentrations of meaningful informations within your thesis. You need to give a perception to the reader that your thesis is written in a so concise manner that every word counts, that train the readers to pay attention to every single word and every single sentence throughout your thesis. Instead of you have a good mixture between informations which is meaningful and those which is redundant, then the reader will on and off from engaging with your thesis. Normally we do not like that, because you cannot guarantee when the reader disengage with your thesis, when he will come back to re-engage with your thesis. The most common examples that we encounter from the reader, if your literature review is so poorly written, a lot of grammatical error, not written in the concise manner, which is also rather lengthy, boring to read, not really getting the significance of reading through your literature review, as commonly expected from the typical students who are not properly trained to write the literature review. What's going to happen next is, by reading the first few pages of the literature review, most likely the readers will skip the entire chapter, go straight to the research methodology. In fact, by reading the first few pages of your literature review, experienced reader will be able to quickly identify whether you are doing the literature review right. If they confirm that you are not doing it in the right way, it is a waste of the time for the reader to read from the first word to the last word in your literature review chapter. Even he tries so much effort to go through the entire chapter, most likely it will not be meaningful or useful at the later stage of your thesis. Therefore, normally we do not like the readers to disengage from your thesis. You have to write properly and make sure everything you write carries some significance within your thesis. There is another misconception among the students. Knowing the maximum allowable page, let's say it is 300 pages, from the first page of your introductions to the last page of your reference. The maximum allowable page is 300. Most of the students will have a misconception that if they complete their thesis within 100 pages, it will be as if he is not doing anything, or it is as if like he did not cover adequate depth or breadth of the research study, that he have little information to disclose to the examiner or the supervisor. Automatically, a typical student will try to lengthen the thesis, make the sentence to be longer, enlarge the figures so that one pictures take the entire pages of your thesis, trying to put into a lot of non-meaningful discussions. There will be a lot of repetitions until you reach to the number of pages close to the maximum pages of 300, so that your thesis look thicker, as if you have done a lot of work. This may be true among the perceptions of the students, but it is totally not true for your supervisor and examiner, because your supervisor and examiners are looking for meaningful informations. They are expecting the thesis is concisely written, and then based on their experience, writing a thick thesis with diluted information is easy. But if you write a thin thesis in a very concise manner with high concentrations of information, it is more challenging. This is something new concept that I would like to emphasize to the students, especially if you are first time being introduced with this. Writing thin thesis, highly concentrated with meaningful informations in a very concise manner and in a very readable manner with perfect grammar and punctuations, meeting the objective of the thesis without compromising the breadth and depth as required for the degree that you are pursuing. This is very challenging. If you wish to impress your supervisor and examiner, you should go for the concise writing with as minimum page as possible. Don't ever try to dilute the informations, purposely make the sentence to be long, just for the sake that to fulfill the numbers of pages. If you have tried your best, covering sufficient breadth and depth, and your number of pages still less than 200, probably 100 and something, but if you look into your thesis, the amount of information is sufficient, you have a good critical thinking, very strong message to be delivered, fulfilling the objective of your thesis. The only thing that you might not be satisfied is the numbers of pages seems to be quite less as compared to a typical PhD thesis. Don't worry, just submit your thesis, let the supervisor to review and decide whether it's fulfilled the requirement of your PhD or your master degree. And then normally, if you are doing your postgraduate study seriously, diligently, you will find that the number of pages as limited for the masters and PhD, let's say 200 and 300 pages respectively, is actually not enough for you to compile everything. At least this is my experience. When I first submitted my PhD thesis, I overshoot the number of pages by more than 100 plus. I thought it should be okay for me just to submit that until it is rejected by the School of Postgraduate Study. Then I will need to come back and further discuss with my supervisor. Then that brings us a headache. We will have to choose those which is significant, doing big renovations in terms of the writing style, and then revamp the entire thesis to make it much more concise so that it fit within the page limit for your masters and PhDs. In most of the situation that because you are doing the work for several years, so many informations that you acquired, so many things that you have reviewed, so many findings that you have acquired, and each of them require in-depth discussions, and then you can address the result, processing it in various aspects, There are so many things that you can write in your thesis. And then normally at the student stage, we are so particular in terms of the details. It seems like all the informations are equally significant. We are not able to, or we do not wish to remove those which is in fact not that significant. Therefore, the point here is the number of pages as limited by the postgraduate study. That would be just nice. In fact, if you are really hardworking, you will find the numbers of pages here insufficient. Therefore, by all means, you have to write it in a very concise manner in order for your informations to be fully delivered within the limited numbers of pages. Next, we proceed with our discussions on the language skill. Another common mistake is about the tenses that you use throughout your thesis. There will be significant confusions among the students when to use present tense, when to use past tense. Next, when you write your thesis, you need to make your thesis to be reader friendly. You need to effectively communicate the messages and to make the reader looking forward to what's come next. You will need to consistently bring in new ideas and significant informations for the readers every time when the readers finish a statement. And when you finish a point, there will always be further elevations with meaningful discussions or upgrading in terms of the interpretations of certain points, which the readers are looking forward to, and this can make the readers to continuously engage with your thesis. You will also need to arrange the material in such a way that it leads to the readers to the intended conclusions. You have to guide the directions of the thoughts of the reader. The most ideal situation is, based on the information that you have disclosed to the reader, by digesting those informations, the reader will lead to the same conclusions as given by you, and you will receive agreement by the readers that based on the logical thinking or based on the prior knowledge and understanding of the readers, the things that you have disclosed are well justified, which is in line with the perceptions and understandings of the reader. Regarding the tenses, these are several simple rules. You will use the simple past tense for specific methods. You will use the simple present for the facts, and you will use the past perfect tense for general findings or many studies. We will discuss in detail regarding the tenses in the following lecture, as well as some detailed example that you encounter in different sections of your thesis.